So if you watched my previous video about my biggest potential concern with the PvE changes that were announced at the Heidel Ball, I guess what about a month now? Well, now it's a pretty big concern, and I kind of knew that these changes were potentially coming. And these changes to PvE can drastically make a lot of people with this game, right? And even a few of the content creators, they were saying before these changes were even implemented that the AP cap slash requirements were going to be a big W because it would give you a sense of progression. And I can kind of get that to a certain extent, but at the same time, it doesn't really affect those content creators because they are already in-game players at in-game spots, which actually after this update, it's a pretty massive W for them because now they're making more money. Right. The issue is it's more of the mid-level players who are being affected. And, those people were grinding certain grind spots and making pretty decent money before this update and could maybe try out higher grind spots, but maybe, wasn't as efficient. But now after this update, those people will now have to kind of regress back to older grind spots where maybe, they've already been there for hundreds of hours. And now they're potentially making even less money because they can't do the same grind spots previously, which a lot of people are kind of mad or upset about trolls because trolls was such good money at a low AP threshold. And, I can rightfully understand that because they made getting to in-game grinding spots way more difficult for those mid-level players because now they're making less money. And let's be honest, no one really likes to be nerfed. And so who is affected by this, right? It's those individuals who are kind of in that 300 AP to 330 AP range, or maybe even like 300 to the 340 AP range. And then people who are super geared, but enjoy doing those lower gear score requirement spots. And so for in-game players with a lot of gear, right, they would like to come to trolls and, they would make like 13K trash without Agris. And now after this update, they're making way less. And that's actually a lot of the grinding spots now. So, if you out gear that grinding spot AP recommendation, then you're going to be making less money and pretty much will be making the same amount as someone who has way lower gear score, but they have that recommended gear score at that grinding spot, right? And in my opinion, that's just stupid. Like if you're going to go to a grinding spot that has the recommended AP of like 310 and say, you have a player who is 310 AP and a player who is 340 AP, theoretically or realistically, the 340 AP person should make way more money than the 310 AP person. But I do think that if the 340 AP person goes to a 340 AP grinding spot, then they should be making even more money than, say, the 310 AP, right? Kind of confusing. But either way, now you're kind of restricted to certain grind spots, and it just strips away the freedom that you had when it came to the grinding spots. So if we look at my numbers like trolls, personally, I went from making about 11.5K trash an hour to now making about 14K trash an hour with Agris. So I do think for those people who maybe only grind like 1 hour a day, like myself, actually might be at a slight advantage because every spot now is Agris efficient. But I will say the mobs are definitely tankier. I did do Hooligan base, which I usually average around 28 to 29K without Agris an hour, and then about 37K with Agris an hour. And now with the new update, I'm now averaging about 24 to 25K an hour without Agris, and then about 33K trash an hour with Agris. So you can definitely see that I had a pretty significant reduction. I also did Underground Gyphin, which before the update without Agris, I was doing about 28K trash an hour. And now after the update, I'm making about 20K trash an hour, which kind of sucks because every so often I do like grinding there because it's just a really cool spot, like aesthetically. And I just like the mechanics, and the experience is really good. Um, I was able to do Tungrad Ruins. So with that spot, I was averaging about 22k trash an hour without Agris, to now averaging about 26k trash an hour without Agris. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test it with Agris at this time because you only get 20k every day. And also, I was not able to try out Darkseeker's Retreat because I just don't have the gear to even try it now, which kind of sucks. However, if you do have the gear, I've seen from many people that the spot is much easier now, and you can actually make a lot more money than before the patch if you have that recommended gear. So yeah, I just think overall these PvE changes is just a big L, especially for those people who are kind of in that middle pack, right? Or who are in that kind of 300 AP to 330 AP range, because now you are restricting those players to fewer grind spots. Now they're potentially making less money, which is before that person had a lot more freedom on what grind spots to choose from. And you could also utilize more of your skill set to get higher trash numbers versus someone who might not be as good with their class, right? But now you're more hard locked to certain grind spots no matter what, because you're essentially griefing yourself if you don't follow the AP recommendations. And again, that just strips away the freedom of being able to do a variety of grind spots. And I just hate that. Like, honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be mad if they did a system where every grind spot was more viable, but it scaled depending on your AP. So if you're in a certain AP range, right, you're potentially expected to make this amount of trash loot plus or minus a few thousand depending on your skill set. Just let us kind of grind wherever. I don't know. Maybe that's a worse system. It probably is a worse system, but either way, these PvE changes for the middle level players just doesn't feel good. And it's not even good for the higher in-game players who like to grind at the lower AP grind spots. However, the in-game spots are much easier now if you have the recommended gear. So just kind of keep that in mind. But I do think these changes could potentially drive away many people from the game. I will say, though, that this system probably would have been great many years ago when open world PvP was a thing, because at least that would have kind of limited the high gear score players doing lower gear score requirement spots and would have allowed the kind of open world PvP among the players to be kind of better matched, right? But now in today's game, it really doesn't matter if a higher gear score player goes to a lower gear score spot, because you don't have to worry about getting griefed. Plus, there were plenty of viable different grind spots that you could go to, and you also had the Marnie realm. So yeah, the moral of the story: restricting players or locking players behind just a couple of grind spots just feels terrible, and just kind of makes a game that's supposed to have sandbox elements of freedom into more of just this locked linear progression path that, again, just doesn't feel that great. But that's just my take. I guess we'll just have to kind of adjust our mindset and just grind the recommended AP, DP requirements for that specific spot based on your gear, because I don't really see PA reverting these changes. But let's take a look at what the community is saying. All right, so let's take a look at a few of these Reddit posts and just kind of get a sense of what the community is saying. I'm not going to go over every single comment, but we'll just kind of briefly look at these. So PvE revamp disaster. So I've previously been grinding at Tungrad Ruins before the revamp with a decent speed at 335 AP with 27k trash an hour. This morning, after the maintenance, I tried grinding with the same AP and I can no longer do my usual combo. I now need to throw 3 more skills to kill the pack. I'm sitting at 1380 AP with buff. I know Tungrad requirements has changed to 340, but it feels like they are a lot tougher than they were previously. Yeah, I mean, so and this could also maybe a little bit class dependent too, because actually, like for me, I have 336 or 337 AP, and so we're kind of pretty similar. And I'm actually doing more trash an hour now without Agris. I haven't been able to try it with Agris yet, but yeah, actually for me, it's been better. But again, that could also be kind of class specific as well. A lot of things have been changed. Dungrad Ruins went from 320 AP to 330, and they said they'll make sure spots with higher requirements will provide a higher income. Talking about a disaster. Right now, it's a little too early. Let's wait for more tests. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but how specifically was income or efficiency increased? Unless the trash value was jacked through the roof or they adjusted the drop tables on the loot. This is a hard nerf, which I suppose is fine, but many will not be happy. Yep. Life skilling until they figure this out is looking pretty good. This is probably why they're selling the $10 fishing rod. Oh no. Tested for just a bit, but it seems that the spot adjustments were more detrimental than the actual class damage from the rework. Remember, we get a 5% crit and back on Cron Mill now. TR is horrible due to a now stronger emphasis of back attacks, while the spot incentivizes quick pack-to-pack combat. So we can't reposition. DSR feels like just a bit of a buff. I was on Awakening Dosa. I'm thinking it's because we got more back attack exposure in that spot. Of course, apparently, Gyfin and Hologum are also gutted. Yep. I think this will depend on spot to spot in the upcoming weeks. They are already doing an emergency patch of Olins and Orza. Yep. Very, very true. Very, very true. 14 to 15k an hour in Quint to now 7 to 8k an hour for me. So this person was probably a very high gear scored individual who probably came here and probably made this amount of money like without Agris, and now they're making only 7 to 8k an hour again without Agris. If I had to take a guess, 356, 429, which here I was getting 31k at DSR before. Today I got 35k. Plus, I feel like I was killing the mobs faster. Definitely a buff for me. Yeah, exactly. I mean, for in-game players who are already doing these in-game spots, grinding spots, it's a big W for them. Ah, yes, PA buffing people already in game while nerfing everyone trying to get there. Good move to ensure that it will be even harder now to reach Adania for most players. Yeah, I'll tell you that the mid-tier players they're pretty upset. This update literally is to leave the area you were previously farming and go somewhere else, but everyone wants to stay in the same place. Yeah, and that's the issue too, is like you just made maybe the upper end of the grind spot, and now after this update, now you're being pushed back to the previous grind spots that you were already at, which kind of sucks. More like going back to a grind spot you are on minus 20 AP previously. Yeah, that's a good point. Total disaster. Most 310 to 330 spots are so tanky. Yep. All right, so here's another one. This is a pretty big one here. The new Monster Zone changes feel terrible for high gear players who enjoy low AP spots. I wanted to share some thoughts on the recent Monster Zone update and how it's affected my experience as a high gear player who enjoys grinding lower AP zones. Here we go. The change after the patch, monster zones now scale damage based on your AP relative to the recommended AP of the spot. If you're grinding in a zone where your AP is higher than the spot's recommendation, your damage is now artificially reduced. In contrast, if you grind in a zone that matches your AP, you'll kill mobs much faster. What the devs wanted, this was clearly designed to push well-geared players into higher end grind zones and optimize the gear progression flow. While I understand the intention, the execution feels awful. Here's why it feels terrible. It ruins personal grinding choices. Yep. I've been grinding in a 280 AP zone with my 344 Ranger for a while. I love the spot, the aesthetics, the mob density, the loot table, everything. It was my place, but after the patch, the mobs suddenly feel tankier than before. Even though I've put in the time and effort to get to 344 AP, I can no longer kill monsters in a 280 spot as efficiently as before. Why? Because I've outgeared her too much? That's punishing, not rewarding. I agree. And it's just stupid. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really stupid. Like why are you going to punish those players who want to go to that grinding spot? Right? We should have the freedom to go wherever we want to. It's immersion breaking and makes power progression meaningless. What's the point of getting stronger if I can't feel that strength? If a mob and a lower tier zone don't melt under my attacks anymore, then where's the power fantasy? Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to my point where if you have a 310 AP person and a 340 AP person, right? They shouldn't be making the same amount of money at that grind spot. The 340 AP person should be making a lot more money. It completely breaks immersion when my fully geared player struggles more now than before the patch against the mobs that are supposed to be weaker. It's like watching your character level up on paper, but feeling no difference in game. This is a sandbox, not a spreadsheet. BDO has always sold itself as a sandbox MMO where you can carve your own path. Yep, having your own freedom. Forcing players to grind in the zones the devs feel are appropriate for their gear turns into a formulaic experience. I shouldn't be shoved into a spot just because the system says it's my AP bracket. Let me play how I want. If I enjoy grinding a lower AP zone for whatever reason, aesthetic, loot, or discomfort, that should be valid. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with this person's points. In conclusion, the change may help with spot congestion at the high end or with progression funneling, but it comes at the cost of player freedom. And that's one thing I feel like BDO has done so well compared to other MMOs is you have the freedom to kind of do whatever you want, however you want, and to progress your character in any way that you want. And because of this, now you're being locked to certain grind spots based on your AP. And I just don't like that. Just don't like it. If you're a veteran or a well-geared player who grinds for reasons beyond raw silver hour, this update feels like a straight downgrade in experience. Would love to hear if anyone else feels the same way. I'm curious how it's affected your grind spots and overall gameplay. The sandbox game is running out of sand as time goes on. Oh, bro, that's a pretty good comment right there. There are literally 100 reasons anybody grinds at any particular place in a sandbox MMO. For example, some people might just care about mob density, more kills. Some are farming specifically for completing titles, Marnie Stone, grinding. Others have different variants of meta that they wish to pursue. For example, they might only care about combat experience, which to this day is still optimally grinded at Gaiafan. Yep, which is now even more miserable than it has been lately. If PA really thinks that Dino will fix this, they need to basically accommodate every type of sandbox meta, including like one-shot spots, tower spots, group spots, XP spots, title spots. Treasure spot, you get the idea. Don't worry, they feel terrible for lower geared players. 295 AP as well. Lungum is a disaster now, even aside from being bugged, so there's no boss spawning. No boss. See, I didn't have any. Honestly, the weird thing with Hologum is so the mobs are tankier, but the boss dies so much faster. Like, it used to take a while to kill that boss. I feel like I kill him in like 3 skills. I haven't had any issues with like the bosses like bugging out though. But yeah, it's so weird how the bosses die so quickly, but the actual mobs take forever to kill. it just doesn't feel right. Orcs didn't feel much better either when I tried. I couldn't imagine what Orcs feels like. I actually totally feel you. People who are flaming are missing the point. In this game, you grind tens of hours a week. You want to be able to grind where you actually enjoy. I personally hate Tungrad Ruins. I prefer Orcs. The aesthetic is so much nicer. It's open. I enjoy the mini event more. It is beneficial for the game's longevity and players' enjoyment to not limit where you can efficiently grind per point. If I'm forced to grind somewhere I dislike, I'm not playing as much. If I'm having fun doing Centaurs for some reason, still, why punish me for doing so? Yeah, this is all said without the intention of griefing players and all of that. I personally don't enjoy PvP in this game at all, so I don't partake, and I don't know many others don't too either. Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think that's not an issue. Like griefing other players, like higher gear score players are not really griefing lower gear score players anymore, right? Maybe a few years, this would have been a good system when open world PvP was a thing, but Like that's not a thing anymore in this game. Previously, I was grinding at low AP spots to complete guild missions. It was fun to one shot and go to the next group. Now I have to struggle. 35k at Gaifen before the patch. Right now, just got 25k with Suck DK. This patch just feels awful. Yep. All right, so let's take a look here at kind of at this last post. Thoughts on the recent BDO grind spot changes. Honestly, I think these changes for BDO are a good step forward. It helps break up the grind and keeps players from getting stuck at the same spots for too long. I came back to the game last year, and the worst part for me was grinding at Hold'em for months. From what I can tell, the direction they're going is pretty positive. Yeah, there's some bugs at certain spots, but those will get fixed. The progression system still feels familiar, kind of like how in other games, Maple Story, your level or Arcane Force opens up new areas. In BDO, it's your AP that unlocks higher in grind zones. I get the concern about treasure pieces, but those will be attainable everywhere with the upcoming patch. Sure, it sucks a bit that high AP players can't really grind at lower AP spots anymore, but overall, I think this is the right move for the game. Yeah, nope. I just, maybe, and I know I've said this multiple times now, maybe 5 years ago, but I just don't really like it. Don't really like it. Elliott Beach seems pretty much the same. There are other grind locations. Fishing all day. Oh goodness. If that was all it was, people wouldn't have a problem, but they actually made this issue even worse because grinding was slowed down basically everywhere except the very high end and Hex. Yeah, they're already going to be patching that next week. So you spend more time grinding to reach the same targets, period. Let's see, AP that unlocks higher in grind zones, which often are not better silver. That's the issue they should have addressed directly. Hooligan was ridiculously good for the AP requirement. The solution wasn't to make every other grind spot slower, including Hooligan. It was to make the silver better at higher AP spots, not worse. And again, it's all of those things where getting nerfed just doesn't feel good. Like getting your money per hour like cut by a lot, 20-30%, doesn't really feel that good. And I think it's one of those things too, like if you only grind 1 hour a day, like it's not that big of a deal because you're going to be having Agris on. But the issue is if you're grinding multiple hours a day, right now it's becoming less efficient for you and just not really worth it. It's the Gearlit players who got messed up by this change. I barely have any spots to grind at 310 AP that I actually enjoy. Boom, I actually enjoy. Yep. Only spots are the sweet ones and ones I don't like. Not only that, those spots will be contested by a lot, so it's going to be harder to gain silver to make progression, in my opinion. That is a good point too, because now you're being funneled to these certain grind spots. Now there's going to be a lot more people there. I feel like the medium spots got overtuned. Likely we'll see them nerfed. Give it time. Yeah, okay, give it time. We'll see. I think this person's saying like the medium spots, they're more difficult. So this person's saying that they'll be nerfed and that they'll be better. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like they probably won't. We'll see. Also mid game is probably around 310 to 320, and that AP you start to get into the decky spots. So the only really good spot is Hex, which is totally over the top. With 315 AP, my 51 maids aren't enough to grind in the Marnie realm with Agris. We're talking about 2.1 bill on Hex and 1.2 to 2 bill on decky spots without Agris. With every sub 300 AP spot being at 1.2 or less. That's the problem with a lot of the posters here. There's no life in the game, making hundreds of billions enhancing daily, running around with 350 plus AP and not really understanding the realities of life. They've forgotten what it's like to be behind. Getting to 320 AP is not that easy. Heck, despite so many freebies given out, for newer players or those who don't live to grind, even getting to 300 AP is a big achievement. Just tap your Kersides and your Wailing Armors to try. It's easy. Go grind Hooligan for a few months and you'll catch up. And then you try to do that and realize you only make like 700 mil silver at most each hour, yet your next upgrade is 30 bill plus. We all did that. It's the usual response, except now not everyone is willing to spend hundreds of hours to see bigger virtual numbers in a game. And with all of that, they've made it harder to catch up. You're right, getting stuck places sucks. What? Now I'm stuck at Gaifen Underground again after thinking I'd never have to go back. Lovely. See, I love Gaipin though. I love that place. It's a disgusting idea to reduce that diversity and choice for the player. They are actual human beings who defend this crap. I wrote paragraphs to explain why this update was bad, but some people are just too far gone, I guess. Yeah, I saw a lot of these people in the subreddit. Really unfortunate to see how things can be that bad. The update literally locks players into specific spots until they have the gear for it. What are you even saying? All for the sake of streamlined gear progression in a sandbox MMO, lol. It really should go without saying, but limiting where players can grind exclusively based on gear is bad when it's a sandbox. The bigger issue isn't that high gear score can't go to lower end grind spots. It's that the majority of the mid-game grind spots are actually bad, even being at the cap. The problem is that this update only helped players who were already 330 plus and took a fat crap on anyone under that. It would never be a good idea to limit a player's experience based solely on their gear score in a sandbox. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, there you have it. I think for the most part, right, if you only grind 1 hour a day, hopefully you won't be affected too much. The issue is if you're grinding multiple hours a day, then it's just really not going to be very efficient for you, unfortunately, especially if you are a kind of that mid-level player. So just remember, keep your aggros turned on. Just kind of follow that AP recommendation. I've been seeing like Jade Starlight Forest seems like a pretty good grind spot at this moment. And of course Hex too, but Hex is going to be getting nerfed here fairly soon. But yeah, I would like to kind of hear from you. What are your thoughts on this update? Are you loving it? Are you hating it? Let me know down in the comments. But as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.
Sunsets on that desert sky. It's just you and I.